Welcome to the conference on narratives of resilience, exploring resurgence in global literature day 1. This gathering invites us to reflect on how literature from around the world captures the spirit of resilience, how individuals and communities confront adversity, recover from trauma, and imagine new futures. Across the coming sessions, we will explore powerful stories of survival, resistance, and renewal, and consider how literature becomes a space for healing, hope, and resurgence. Thank you for joining us in this important conversation. We look forward to thought-provoking discussions and meaningful exchanges throughout the conference. Now I invite our worthy Dean of Islamic and Oriental Learning, Professor Dr. Faliha Zara Kazmi, to come onto the stage and deliver her welcome note. Dr. Kazmi, with her decades of teaching experience, leadership, and dedicated service, has significantly contributed to the development of languages and cross-cultural understanding. Her commitment for our academic excellence has shaped the vibrant intellectual environment.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you all here today at the international conference organized by the English Department of LCWU. On behalf of the worthy Vice Chancellor and organizers of the conference, especially the head of the department and the faculty, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests, scholars and participants, especially who have traveled afar to be here with us today. Your presence adds significance as it presents an opportunity to connect and share ideas on the event topic, the narrative of resilience, exploring resurgence in global literature. The study of resilience is rooted in humanities and with time gaining more importance in fiction. As resilience is akin to growth and survival, it is the aim of the conference to view literature of resilience in its widest context and to analyze different concepts and choices that underlay resilience. I am delighted to know that at this conference we are joined by over 36 presenters from all over the globe. I am confident that the discussions and interactions that take place over the next 3 days of the conference will be both stimulating and encouraging to all of us. I thank my guests once again who have been gracious to join us to share their knowledge and insights. Once again, I welcome you all, and I want to congratulate the English department and all of the all faculty of English department for this event. Hopefully it will be a successful event, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. With great honor, we invite the illustrious Dr. Amara Khan, head of the English department, to deliver the opening address and provide a scholarly introduction to our conference. Her academic excellence, passion for literature, and inspirational leadership will undoubtedly leave a lasting impact on our collective pursuit of knowledge. Dr. Khan, please.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a very good morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Faliha. This was not possible without your support. So I formally welcome all of you to the International Conference on Literature 2025, which is hosted by the Department of English at Lahore College for Women University. It is both an honor and privilege to welcome esteemed scholars, writers, and participants from across Pakistan and abroad to this 3-day academic gathering. I just met one of the participants who has specially come from Sindh, and I am very thankful to you and very warmly welcome you for this conference. The theme of our conference, Narratives of Resilience, Exploring Resurgence in Global Literature, emerges from a collective need to understand how literature reflects, responds to, and reimagines the human capacity to endure, resist, and transform. In a world that continues to grapple with crisis, be it social, political, psychological, and ecological, literature becomes not only a mirror of pain, but also a source of hope and renewal. Over the next 3 days, we will journey through an exciting and thought-provoking program that includes panels on post-colonial resilience, gender and identity, diaspora, Palestinian struggle, post-humanism, trauma, folklore, and media. With over 11 sessions, keynote speakers, workshops, and rich discussions, this conference aims to foster dialogue across disciplines and cultures. The theater and media workshops, along with poetry readings and student participation, reflect our commitment to making this a truly inclusive and interdisciplinary experience. This conference is not only an academic exercise, but a celebration of the power of language, memory, and resistance, of the stories that sustain us when everything else collapses. I am very happy to see all my former colleagues, former heads of the department, and my friends coming from different universities as session chairs and panelists. A very warm welcome to all of you and to all the students sitting as audience. I know that many of us, having seen the program, came specially to listen to Professor Shaista Sonu Sirajuddin, and I feel very sad to announce that she just suddenly got unwell and she has been advised bed rest for a few weeks. And because she is more precious to us than any of the event or any of the conference, so we have her prayers sent out to Ms. Sirajuddin, and we hope that inshallah very soon we will invite her here and we will get a chance to listen to her and to learn from her. So without any further ado, let us now begin this intellectual journey together with open minds and open hearts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khan, for your time and valuable words. Moving ahead, we are joined by Stephanie Barbe-Hammer through video. She is a 7-time Pushcart Prize nominee in fiction, non-fiction, and poetry, and is the author of 2 poetry collections, 2 novels, a novelette, and a How to Write Magical Realism craft book. Originally from Manhattan, Stephanie moved to Southern California in 1986. She taught at the University of California, Riverside campus for 30 years. A professor emeritus of comparative literature, she teaches creative writing at Hugo House, Seattle. She served as managing director at Shark Reef Literary Magazine for several years and is culture editor at large and writer at the Journal of Radical Wonder. She sits on the advisory board of Writers Block, and she is joined by video with us.
Greetings, dear colleagues. From Santa Barbara, California, my name is Stephanie Barbe-Hammer. I'm a writer as well as a scholar. I worked for many years at the University of California, Riverside campus. My scholarly expertise is comparative literature, and I am so honored to be able to address all of you and share with you a few thoughts about the crucial subject of your conference. Before I start, I want to thank the sponsors so much for inviting me to share some thoughts with you. And I want to send, as we say in the United States, a special shout out to wonderful Aisha und Rashid, who I know a bit and who I consider a friend, although we've never met in person. Thank you so much, Aisha. And I'm always thrilled to talk to a women's college because I am myself a graduate of Smith College, which you may have heard of, which is a women's college in New England, and where many of our first ladies have gone, as well as a couple of very important feminist thinkers, including Gloria Steinem. In any event, yes, resilience. We've been talking a lot about resilience lately in our country in the wake of the most recent presidential election. So there's a weird sort of interesting statedness to my being asked to address this question today. What is resilience? It, of course, has two definitions, as you probably know. The first one is physical, and it is the ability of a substance or a material to be deformed, compressed, stretched out of shape, and to bounce back and retain or reacquire its original integrity and form. The other meaning is psychological and refers to the ability of a person to undergo massive pressure, difficulties, tragedies, and yet bounce back, retain their form, their integrity as individuals. And I'm always interested in etymology, as I imagine all of you are. And I learned that resilience comes from the Latin word resiliere, to jump back or to recoil. So the title of this conference is wonderful because we have resilience, which can be a move backwards, and resurgence, which is, of course, a move forward. So there's a certain dynamism already implied in the idea of resilience. So what makes us resilient? And what in particular, as women, and as women intellectuals, as women artists, and as allies of women artists and writers, makes us resilient? When I think of resilience, I think of not just of my family members, but in the intellectual sphere of the writers who inspire resilience. And I'm going to mention four of them. And the first one is a colleague of mine from the University of California, Irvine. And this is Ruth Kluger, who I had the honor to know a little bit. Ruth was a distinguished scholar in Germanistic and German studies, but she was also a Holocaust survivor. And her memoir, Weiterleben, Still Alive, talks a great deal about resilience. And Ruth was herself a highly resilient person. Very funny sense of humor, very witty, not ever abashed by detractors, of which she had often had many in an audience, unafraid of critique. And in her book, in Weiterleben, she describes being at the death camp, Auschwitz, with her mother, who she argues with throughout the experience, which is great. If you are a mother or have a mother, you know that one argues with one's mother. And she describes a particularly amazing scene in the book where she experiences a miraculous moment of grace through a very unexpected source, namely a Nazi officer who saves her life. Ruth also talks about reciting poetry to herself throughout this experience, and that enabled her to be resilient, to be lucky enough to live through it, and to remain a resilient person going forward. Very inspiring person. Another person who I had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know just a tiny bit was the African-American science fiction novelist Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler grew up in very impoverished circumstances, but was determined to learn how to write well. So she did not go to college, but she took classes at various other places and became an award-winning novelist. Her book, Parable of the Sower, which is the book I discussed with her, is about a young woman living in Los Angeles during a post-apocalyptic event. And this young girl assembles a group of people. She becomes a leader. She invents a new religion and a new politics, and she leads this group of people out of Los Angeles all the way to Northern California, which, if you know the state, we know is quite a long distance. Octavia was incredibly unpretentious, incredibly welcoming, happy to talk about her work, and very, very encouraging of other writers. So incorporated resilience herself and also wrote about resilient women characters. Another author who I've not had the opportunity to meet, but who I find very inspiring, is Isabel Hamad, who is an Anglo-Palestinian writer who wrote a fantastic novel that came out recently called Speak, Ghost. And it's about a Palestinian theatrical group who decide to stage a production of Hamlet in the West Bank, and they are absolutely determined to do it. They encounter all kinds of obstacles, but they are nimble enough to persevere and make this production happen. It's an incredible novel. I really, really recommend it. As a writer, I also look to my own writing as inspiration, if that makes sense. To the writers in the room, you perhaps know what I'm talking about. We write and sometimes aren't completely aware what we're doing, and then we read what we've written and find that a source of strength. And that happened to me in my most recent novel, Journey to Melville City, which is a kind of mystery set on a train. If you know Murder on the Orient Express, you may recognize that trope. But the book features three very resilient, very nimble female protagonists. The first one is Allison. She is a Jewish girl from New York, very aggressive. She's a dropout. But underneath that veneer, she's extremely idealistic and determined to see justice meted out in any way she can. She's protagonist number one. Protagonist number two is Diamond, who is an African American poet who is older, who is also determined to have her voice be heard. The third is a young Chinese vlogger whose name is Maybelle. She's very social, she's very friendly, but underneath all that is a very serious quest for the truth and to support her friends no matter what happens. I read my own work and think, oh, I need to learn from these characters. And I find them a source of inspiration. And I've saved, in some ways, the best for the last. This is a writer who is not a woman, but who is a wonderful ally to women, and that is Mohsin Hamid. And his fabulous magical realist novel, Exit West, which I imagine a bunch of you know. And I ask you to think about the characters, the two characters in that book, Saeed and Nadia. Who is the more resilient character? I think the answer is obvious. It's Nadia. She is the person who is really nimble, who is able to deal with setbacks and to avoid danger, which again, remember, resilience is also that recoil when necessary. She's a very inspirational character, and of course, the novel is incredible. Very quietly gets us to think about immigration, about freedom, about what we owe each other, and so on. So these are the writers that I think about when I think about the challenge of resilience. And it's a challenge that I think we're all able to meet. So I want to close by wishing you all a beautiful, beautiful conference. I look forward to viewing and reading the proceedings. And I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be present with you today. Thank you so much.
It was indeed a thoughtful talk. Thank you, Ms. Hammer, for your insights on resilience. Now I will invite our panel one moderator, Ms. Aisha Amtul Rashid, to come onto the stage and invite the session chair and panelists. This particular session traces the reflection of resilience in post-colonial literature. Ms. Rashid is senior lecturer in Department of English, Lahore College for Women, University, Lahore, Pakistan. In addition to her academic work, she has made significant contributions to the creative writing landscape through translation, editing, and proofreading projects. She is the founder of The Bridge, an innovative online forum that connects writers from across the globe. She has served as the guest editor of Shark Reef, a literary magazine based in the USA. She is also the advisor of Fariha Basit Khan Literary Society, Al Khidmat Literary Guild, and Kiran Magazine LCWU. We welcome her.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. Thank you very much, Ms. Faria, for such an elaborate introduction. I must say I'm overwhelmed and at the same time extremely excited to be part of today's panel, especially alongside the three distinguished figures from the world of academia, and luckily two of them happen to be my own teachers. So, dear audience, I welcome you all to the first panel of our International Conference on Literature. And the title of this panel is Exploration of Resilience in Post-Colonial Literature. Ladies and gentlemen, from navigating cultural dislocation to confronting historical trauma, post-colonial authors reveal how resilience shapes identity and community in powerful transformative ways. Our panelists today will explore these themes through diverse literary voices and perspectives, shedding light on the enduring strength that defines post-colonial narratives. Please allow me to introduce our panelists and session chair to you all. Our first panelist is Dr. Rizwan Akhtar, who completed his PhD in post-colonial literature at the University of Essex, UK in 2013. His primary research focus is South Asian literature in English, with a particular emphasis on Indian and Pakistani writers. He also explores gender studies, feminism, and modernism. Dr. Akhtar has published research papers on diverse topics, including memory studies, memoir writing, post-colonial poetry, and partition narratives. He has presented his work at the international conferences in Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, Belgium, and Sweden, covering fields including crime fiction, adaptation studies, and modernist aesthetics. Additionally, Dr. Rizwan is an internationally published poet with his debut collection, Lahore I'm Coming, which is my personal favorite when it comes to Asian poetry, released by Punjab University Press. I would request Dr. Rizwan to come and take a seat on the stage. Please welcome Dr. Rizwan Akhtar. Our second panelist is our very dear Dr. Maruk Bukhari, who is a distinguished academic and seasoned educationist with over 3 decades of experience in teaching, administration, and academic leadership. She has retired from government service in 2024 as the Dean of Arts and Professor of English at Government Graduate College Township, Lahore. She holds a PhD in English from Punjab University and has an extensive background in English literature and language education. Her career spans key roles including head of the English department, principal of Intermediate College, and associate professor at LCWU. She has supervised numerous MS and BS theses, contributed significantly to national curriculum development, and actively participated in academic committees. Dr. Bukhari's research focuses on contemporary Pakistani fiction, disability studies, and post-colonial identity, with several publications in reputed journals and collaborative international academic initiatives to her credit. Please put your hands together for Dr. Maruk Bukhari. Allow me to introduce the session chair for today. The session chair for this panel is Dr. Wasim Anwar. Dr. Anwar is a professor of English and director of International Center for Pakistani Writing in English at Kinnaird College for Women, Lahore. He's been at Forman Christian College and Government College Universities in the capacity of Dean Humanities and Chair English. Recipient of Fulbright Award twice for doctoral studies in 1995, and as a visiting scholar in 2007, Dr. Anwar served as the president of the PAC US Alumni Network and Fulbright Alumni Association. A Gale Group American scholar, he has also received the Punjab Education Department Salam Teacher Award in 2004 and Pakistan Higher Education Commission Best Teacher Award in 2003. He is a lifetime member of the South Asian Literary Association USA and has been on its executive committee for 3 times. Apart from being on the advisory and editorial boards of several renowned research journals and publishing scores of articles, his credit includes books which are Black Women's Dramatic Discourse, which was published in 2009, the South Asian Review, published in 2010, which was a special issue on Pakistani creative writing in English, and very lately, Transcultural Humanities in South Asia. He's also the founding editor-in-chief of the Journal of English Studies at Forman Christian College University. Please welcome my mentor and the session chair for today. Now is the time for paper presentations, and I would request Ms. Faria to call the first presenter.
Thank you, Aisha. For first presentation, we will invite Hira Tare. The title of her presentation is The Palette of Resistance, a critical analysis of non-violent transgression in Han Kang's The Vegetarian 2015.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. So, in Hong Kong's The Vegetarian, a seemingly innocuous act of rejecting meat, of not eating meat, unravels into a critique of patriarchy, capitalism, and ecological exploitation. So today I will explore how the protagonist Yang Hee's non-violent transgressions embody ecofeminist resistance in South Korea's cultural heterotopia. So this analysis bridges Carol J. Adams' The Sexual Politics of Meat and Carolyn Merchant's The Death of Nature to reveal how Yang Hee's body becomes a battleground for autonomy, liberation, which in reality is a paradox. So my research objectives are to investigate how these nonviolent transgressions, which is not eating meat and then eventually not eating anything and not listening to what her family talks about, are employed by the protagonist of the story, to investigate how the relationship between these excessive acts and nonviolent transgressions in the novel to understand the difference between social disruption and bodily autonomy, to understand the paradoxical nature of nonviolence acts in the nature, keeping in view the ways they can simultaneously both be liberating and restricting for the protagonist, and to examine how patriarchy influences gender dynamics and societal expectations in South Korea. And the research questions obviously mirrors these objectives. So my theoretical framework uses Carol J. Adams' The Sexual Politics of Meat, in which she argues that meat eating perpetuates patriarchal dominance by equating women and animals in consumable objects. In The Vegetarian, the protagonist, her husband labels her a stubborn animal for not eating meat, and every time she cries, it is quoted as having an animalistic cry or her crying like an animal. So this act of her being called a stubborn animal and not a human for rejecting something as innocuous as meat, it mirrors Adams' claim that meat is a metaphor for male dominance. And Carolyn Merchant, The Death of Nature, she critiques the capitalist commodification of nature and how it parallels into women's bodies that are being exploited. The protagonist's transformation, she eventually transforms into a tree, a being that she quotes as being only needing sunlight, rebels against this dual exploitation. So together, both these theories expose how the protagonist's resistance disrupts systems that reduce women and nature to something that is just used for consumption, something that is just a resource. Unlike Western ecofeminism and eco-criticism, Kang's narrative reflects South Korea's hybrid identity, where Confucianism and neoliberal capitalism exist simultaneously. So considering we were just given 6 slides, so you're going to have to listen to me when it comes to what happens in the story. So some pivotal moments from the text talk about the fact that the protagonist is many times in the story being force-fed meat, even though she has told everyone that she refuses to eat it. The actual quote goes, her father mashes pork onto her lips and then slaps her when she refuses to eat it. So this shows the violence of patriarchal enforcement. Her animalistic cry symbolizes how society reduces her to just an object, not exactly a living being. Another non-violent transgression that she commits is her silent defiance. Her husband complains, and he quotes, "She was no more aware of my existence." She does not necessarily react to every man in her life, and this passive resistance destabilizes their power, their authority. Her calm existence, her calm reply to everything that is happening in her life subverts the expectation of female docility. The third important part in which she talks about nonviolent transgression is that she believes that eventually she will turn into a plant. She will become one with nature. She will have this arboreal transformation. She declares, and this is a quote straight from the book, "I am not an animal anymore, I need only sunlight." So she rejects these human hierarchies. Her prose, Kang's prose, she talks about how leaves are sprouting out of my body. She echoes Merchant's vision of ecological resistance, where the body becomes a site for radical reimagining. All of this has been done because Kang situates her protagonist and her story in a cultural heterotopia, which is a concept by Foucault denoting spaces that both distort and mirror societal norms. South Korea, being both post-colonial and rapidly modernizing, fits this tension very well, because on one hand we have Confucian tradition in which the protagonist's father and her husband weaponize these Confucian ideas and demand obedience, and her refusal to all their demands violates this duty, framing her as a moral threat. On the other hand, we have this modern capitalization wherein another main character in the story, her brother-in-law, fetishization of her body, painting flowers on her skin, being obsessed with her birthmarks, reflects the capitalist commodification of femininity. So her eventual transformation into a tree ruptures this heterotopia. She's no longer human, animal, or an object. She embodies what could be called as a disturber of hierarchy, challenging both tradition and modernity. And I used the word paradox in one of my objectives. I said that this resilience is paradoxical. It's because on one hand, we have liberation. Her rejecting meat, her rejecting the demands of her family, frees her from patriarchal consumption. Her vegetal identity defies commodification. But on the other hand, this self-starvation erases her humanity. Her sister even observes that she is no longer human, she has become something else. So this duality reflects the double bind of post-colonial resistance. Liberation often comes at a cost of radical sacrifice. So Young Hee, our protagonist, embody our regenerative death drive, destroying the self to create new ecological possibilities. So, in conclusion, the vegetarian redefines resistance as a fraught negotiation between liberation, between agency and annihilation. Our protagonist's nonviolent transgressions, though self-destructive, expose the violence of patriarchal systems. Kang's work challenges us to see resilience not as a triumph, but as a radical reimagining of identity beyond human hierarchies. So this analysis expands ecofeminist discourse by centering East Asian narratives and interrogating the gendered ecology of resistance. As Adam writes, the sexual politics of meat are about who is for dinner, not what is for dinner. And in Hong Kong's The Vegetarian, our protagonist refuses to be on the menu. So this, I would say, is some of my contributions to the ecofeminist discourse, because on first hand, it highlights how Confucian patriarchy shapes resistance in Korean literature. Then our protagonist redefines, her acts redefine agency as reclaiming the body from consumption. and how her arboreal identity, her becoming a tree, critiques capitalist exploitation of women and nature. So I believe further research could explore masculinity studies in Kang's work, apply psychosocial theories to the character, or compare her resistance to characters in other post-colonial literatures. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Hira. Now we will invite Mariam Raza for her presentation, Trauma and Resilience in Awais Khan's Someone Like Her.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Mariam Raza. I am a lecturer at the Institute of English Studies, University of the Punjab, and it feels great to see all of you here. The title of my research paper is Trauma and Resilience in Awais Khan's novel called Someone Like Her. The objective of the study is to basically trace the linguistic, bodily, cognitive, and the patterns which are shown through the behaviors of the characters who undergo trauma. And those characters that I've selected are specifically Aisha and Kamil, so that we can cover both trauma and femininity and trauma and masculinity, because the latter is something that we have overlooked. Nevertheless, we're going to see how both overt and covert defense mechanisms are used to heal or to hide wounds. And the wounds which are inflicted upon Kamil are actually the ones which are evident in retrospect. So we come across this male figure who has healed and how he contributes to Aisha's journey of healing, because Aisha's infliction of trauma is shown to the readers throughout the plot. The research sheds light onto the following research questions, as you can read. How is trauma depicted for the female gender? How does Khan show masculinity and vulnerability? And how does addiction trace the journey of trauma for the characters? So basically the aim of the study is to explore the novel Someone Like Her by Wes Khan through the theoretical framework of Kathy Carrott's trauma theory. The novel was published in 2023, and it very ironically gives us an idea of how the educated, the elite class, is extremely capable of the same kind of barbarity that we see in the jungles. So the tale basically digs deep into the disturbed psychologies not only of the victims but also the perpetrators, namely Raza. And we get to see how the cold monstrosity is shown to us in unexpected ways. Kathy Carrott's book Unclaimed Experience, Trauma, Narrative and History was published in 1996. It builds on to the debate presented by Sigmund Freud. And basically trauma resides in the unconscious realm of our mind, which is timeless and wordless. This is the reason why there is a paradox when somebody undergoes trauma, that you want to retrieve that time period where you've experienced trauma, but you cannot, because remember, it's in a timeless frame. It only comes back to you in your mind through nightmares, or at times through touch, if it's a wound that was inflicted upon your body, or it can even come back through sounds, through fragrances in your unconscious realm. And you will never find words to describe it. That's why people who have been victims of trauma, if you notice, they go quiet, silent. So that steps, linguistic steps also. First is silence, and then the second one is where you want to shout and let it all out. Hence, you have the concept of therapy, or you write, or you talk to people. And then comes a moment of assimilation, where you make peace with it. All right. Now let's discuss, based on the novel, we see Aisha as a character who represents the collective trauma of the Pakistani women, because she's a victim of acid attack. She's also a victim of rape, and that too marital rape. She's also a victim of the kind of bullying that is accepted in our society in the name of honor. She's not given her due status of respect, and the way she has been psychologically manipulated by Raza, a man who wants to marry her simply because she is a prize for her. So this is a kind of psychological infliction that she goes through. In addition to that, she has to go through infliction based on wounds which she gets on her body because she's raped. She's also beaten a lot. She is blindfolded, carried from one place to another, like a captive. And she is locked in a room, she's beaten, all sorts of things are done to her. She escapes abroad to recuperate, to heal. But that is a moment when all the instances, they come back to her. Because remember, they were saved in a timeless and wordless space of her unconscious. That is a moment where she begins to disassociate with reality. So there are moments, fragmentations in the plot of the novel where the character shifts and is simply absent. We're going to analyze that as a form of the fragmented psyche that she develops. Then there are moments when she will simply go quiet throughout the plot. And Kamil is there who supports her. We'll come back to Kamil in 2 minutes. Anyway, Kamil is there to support her, to make her take it all out through linguistic patterns. Words are important. Once you say it, once you tell what you've experienced, then only you can come out of it, because it is expelled through your body through words. By the end of this plot, because remember, it's a collective trauma, so there is this collective victory also. She stands high, she stands tall against the infliction that many women in our society bear, and she actually then becomes a beacon of hope. Moving on to masculinity. Kamil was a man who was married, and his ex-wife, she was a drug addict, and she also committed suicide, and the whole blame was put onto him. And she also used to be abusive towards him. Now, this is where we need to highlight that trauma and masculinity are normally overlooked in our society, because we have this false bravado of masculinity, where a male figure is never seen as somebody who can break down, where a male figure is never seen as somebody who can be soft, somebody who can be hurt, somebody who can accept that he's hurt. Therefore, this is very important, and I'd like to, appreciate the writer over here, that he shows you masculinity in all its facets over there. So as a man, he's silenced by the society, because if he goes out and if he says to somebody that he is tortured by his wife, then imagine the kind of remarks that he'd have to hear. Over time, he joins a therapy group where he struggles really hard to voice it out, to take it out of him. And that is one of the reasons why he also disassociates with people in his life. Therefore, he cannot eventually marry Madiha, the second girlfriend that he has. He cannot start a family. He accepts that all of it was his fault because he deserved it. The kind of victim blaming that is ingrained in our society is also there in masculinity, because it's projected, it's hurled onto them. Over time, it is with the concept of disassociation, when he starts to disassociate himself with this reality, that he comes to, he heals over time. And most of his healing is done when he sees Aisha. So it is through empathy that he himself also heals. In addition to that, homosociality plays a very important role over here. So the leader of his therapy group is the one who takes him out of the deep chasms of trauma that he was in. And over time, Kamil becomes the hero who saves Aisha, and Aisha becomes a heroine who saves all the ladies, all the readers also, and gives them courage to heal and to stand up and to always push back trauma in the very first place. So I'd like to conclude by saying that the study explores masculine resilience in South Asian society, where sadly the ideals of masculinity are fabricated, and psychologically suffocating also for the male consciousness. I'm sure you've read this in Zubinissa Hamidullah's short story also, The Bull and the She-Devil. Moving on, the research manifests the female resurgence as a form of agency in an elite, toxic, patriarchal society. And please keep in mind, when I say patriarchal, it also means that male figures are also victim of it, not just the females, as we've seen over here. The research basically encompasses the concept that trauma and healing of both genders are there to assert how pain, sorrow, and strength, these are concepts which transcend gender and sex. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot about the future implications. If somebody wants to work on it, you're most welcome to work on homosociality, I believe. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mariam Raza. Next, we have with us Ms. Durre Najab. The title of her presentation is spatial nostalgia and counter-memory, revamping the narratives of 1971 through a post-colonial study of Rehana Hassan's Sips from a Broken Teacup. Let's welcome Durre Najaf.
Assalamualaikum everyone. The topic of my research today is spatial nostalgia and counter memory. So this research paper aims to revamp the narratives of 1971 partition of Pakistan through understanding the concepts of autonomy, marginalization, displacement and hegemony from the perspective of an individual. Now, individual memory is not just one individual's perspective, but this paper will analyze how individual memory can serve as a term for counter memory, for countering the majoritarian or the most popular narrative regarding the 1971 partition. This very research is very relevant in the times of today, as Rehana Hassan herself in the preface of the novel mentions that this novel is like ringing an alarm bell for Balochistan currently. This novel was earlier written in 2011 and then a second edition was published in 2013 for that very reason. In this regard, from the perspective of the title, we can look as the cup as symbolic of Pakistan and how it was shattered and broken as a result of the partition, and the tea can be symbolic of the memory, the different layers of memory that we go across, conscious, unconscious, individual, collective, and the binary oppositions associating with it. So the aim of this research is to analyze how spatial nostalgia triggers the revamping of memory in order to bring forth the historical truth. The main objective of the research is to analyze the role and the potential of space and the remembrance that a certain space brings through association and through detachment to insert the idea of counter memory to bring about a certain counter memorical realization of the individuals that they resist and they eventually present their side of history. The first research question is, how does counter memory enable an exploration into the representational spaces of displaced and marginalized identities? Hereby, representational spaces not only adhere to the places that we inhabit, but also to the mental spaces, the psychological spaces, and the social spaces that we live within, but are gone unnoticed when we are discussing the idea of memory and history. History is most importantly from the perspective of the binary opposition, as Michel Foucault himself has said, that history is something that is attributed through the knowledge, and the knowledge is all to the people who possess the power. The second question, research question, aims to analyze how these representational spaces will serve as the point to accentuate a universal experience of history. So this research paper will help analyze how different flashpoints across the entire world can be reverberated and be reinterpreted through the idea of counter memory, with special mention to the way people inhabit space. Looking at the theoretical framework, I have employed the concept of Michel Foucault's counter memory and associated Henry Lebrovoy's concept of space and social production relations in order to analyze this test. So counter memory is defined as a use of history that severes its connect to memory and its metaphysical and anthropological model to construct a counter memory. So when counter memory is something that is there to sever its relationship to memory, it is something that disassociates itself with the memory itself, the definition of memory. How does it dissociate that? As Michel Foucault himself points out, that history is truly possible only against the absence of history. Absence of history hereby points out to the hidden histories that are excluded from the dominant narratives of partition present in Pakistan. John McClure remarks that counter memory contradicts memory. So in order to contradict memory, how he does contradict memory? By presenting their own individual perspective. And when that individual perspective is presented, that creates a gap. That very gap is where resistance builds in, and that is the gap that provides the space for remembrance and nostalgia, and ultimately a resistance among the people through literature, through society, through culture, in order to revolt and present their piece like this is. So hereby, the spatial practice of a society secretes the society's space because it is intimately tied to the relationships of production. Even in the novel, we see how in the setting of the tea garden, despite being serving there for more than 30 years, people do not have control over the resources or even the relationships of production that is being maneuvered by the British Empire as well as people from Bengal who were very much determined to rule that side of the country. In this regard, when marginalized writers are trying to write, according to Zamora, they try to interplay between historical and narrative truth. And this play of historical and narrative truth is only possible through the contradiction that is present between memory and counter-memory, as well as the conflict that goes on between the relationships as well as the mode of production, as common man is disassociated from that very perspective. As a result, this paper analyzes the research gap is the analyzation of the space that is not only physical, social, but also mental. So the space that is lived, that is perceived, and also that is conceived. So in this regard, the starting point of counter memory is space and relationships of power within the hierarchy of the space that is being inhabited. Now coming to the findings, my first research questions aimed at resolving how counter memory explores representational spaces. So counter memory is able to explore these spaces through divesting upon and presenting the politics of hegemonic memory, whereby at one point in time, Rehana Hassan remarks in the novel, if you want to live in this country, it is high time you learned the language. This is her personal experience whereby people from Bengal were uprooted and they had the power and they made sure that all the non-Bengali people residing in that part of the country started learning their language or started to migrate from that space in order to maintain their own hierarchy. Another point that helps explore the representational spaces through counter memory is the spatial hierarchy, a very strict, distinct and linear spatial hierarchy that defines between the gender, between nationality as well as race. Hereby where she mentions, upset the dastur and people begin to feel unsettled. It's best to let things be, you will get to used to it. This idea of letting things as they are, letting them be, is the mingling ground, the third space where spatial nostalgia works to impact upon and reflect counter memory as a form of resistance against the subjugation that people over there were facing. My second research question aimed at analyzing how both of these concepts of spatial hierarchy and politics of hegemonic memory enabled a universal experience. They enabled a universal experience by presenting the narrative truth and subjugating it against the idea of historical truth, as well as providing counter memory as a site for justice. One character in the novel, Iram, remarks when they are made to leave that very place. Rehana and her husband, they have to leave the place and they have no place to hide. Iram, being a Bengali by birth, she says, all I knew was summed up like that. Some Bengalis appear to have a chip on the shoulder. Don't hate us, I beg you. We weren't always like this. So in this regard, this research proves that space is an intersecting point between memory and counter memory. The main finding of this, the conclusion of this research is that the relationship between space, hegemony, and nostalgia, as linear and as strict and disciplinary the spatial hierarchy grows, the hegemony is more overtly spread across, and as a result, the nostalgia is greater because, as Foucault remarks, where there is power, there is ought to be resistance. Lastly, the future implications from this research is, towards the end of the novel, in the book 5 of the novel, Rehana Hassan starts the last chapter by mentioning Diana Rosen's quote. She says, you can get lost in tea. You can find yourself in tea. In fact, I best warn you now, tea can change your life. Tea over here being symbolic of counter memory. And that is how counter memory began to change the lives of many people who not only migrated and were displaced within India and Pakistan, but that also led to this perspective which is right in front of us today, which is not only portraying the violence that was committed by the Mukti Bani, but also the repercussions and the issues that were part of what West Pakistan thought was part of the East Pakistan. So this paper stresses upon memory as a precursor for identity in order to save the future, in order to save the history, and in order to reshape the future. It is also a point of reclamation of social and literary heritage in order to belong from where we are. Sips from a broken teacup here represent the universal flashpoints that needs to be broken and that need to have a certain amount of resistance in order to bring about the historical truth of that matter. Moreover, this research will also help in the study of the development of new material relations that are being evolved as a result of technology, as a result of new actors that are coming in the foreplay. Moreover, spatial hierarchy is one important element that will help to understand the perceived and conceived notions of space that we occupy and also represent individual perspective on history and the present. Lastly, this very research posits a new intervention within postmodern history, that is historiographic metafiction, whereby we can employ fiction, history, in order to understand, in order to resist in a more subtle way against the violence that is being committed in the post-colonial society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dura Najab. Now I request Ms. Aisha Amtul Rashid to start panel discussion.
All right, so we just had these three fascinating presentations, and I believe that these three are different in many ways because they explore different aspects and different dimensions of resilience. So I would like to first brief about the format of the discussion. I'm going to start a discussion on resilience as portrayed in post-colonial texts in general, with a special focus on Indo-Pak literature, and of course, while drawing parallels to the global perspectives as well. So without further delay, I'm going to ask my first question to both the panelists, and I would request you to please answer one by one. My question is this: if the chains of servitude have long been lifted, why do we continue revisiting post-colonial literature and whatever happened in the past during colonization? Do you somehow think that the previously colonized nations that are now freed, that includes us, are somehow still living in the past?
You've asked me this
Yes,
question.
sir, please.
Okay. Yeah, I think the last presentation was on this element of nostalgia, actually. That partly answers the question that why you live in the past. Philosophically speaking, everything is past, you know, and there isn't anything like future, by the way. Future is just a projection of our fantasy. Just like in photography, they say half is the photograph real, the other is an illusion. So it's good to have the illusion of a past. What if a country like us does not have a very good past? The last presentation was very provocative. If I'm not wrong, she used the word partition for 1971, which semantically is quite problematic for me because partition is 47, but there is a huge similarities between the two events actually. But still, I'm a little reluctant to use this word, you know. But since she answered this question, counter memory. So I think going back to the past is a one way if you're a writer. It's your memory actually, and you're countering, she used this word very interestingly, hegemonic memory. Hegemonic memory is actually nationalism, which wants to see you history in a very particular way. Like in our country, history was abolished. It was replaced by Pakistan studies and social studies. So that is hegemonic memory. So we're not taught history. So eventually the counter memory provides us this opportunity to visit the past, you know, in your own way. So writing is the best, perhaps, medium, you know. So this is what I understand. I think it's the nostalgia specifically for the post-colonial nations or the former colonies is inevitable, I think, you know. And you're right. In the second presentation, I haven't read the novel, Avaz Khan's novel. The presenter said that when the character relocates abroad, that is global. You know, when she relocates abroad, It's a kind of a process of recuperation that has started. It means that this is also an effort to get rid of the post-colonial past and to be part of the global fraternity, actually, which also makes a lot of sense. I hope I also make some.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Dr. Maruf, please, can you answer the same question?
I think that it is true that most of the formerly colonized nations got independence by 1980s. Pakistan and India, of course, taking the lead, because both these countries became independent in 1947. And that the Viceroy and the military forces of Great Britain have left our territorial borders long since, and we are now an independent sovereign state. And as the term post-colonial implies that colonization is a thing of the past, but in actuality it is not. Is that all that is there to a colonization which spanned over more than 100 years? I think that the decolonized nations were faced with many problems. A few among these were the cultural displacement, the double consciousness, and the identity crisis. Mike Mini, can you hear me, please? Yes. The identity crisis. All these problems needed to be dealt with. And in order to deal with these, we needed to time and again visit and revisit post-colonial literature. Not to talk of a feeling of psychological limbo, which made most decolonized people feel like psychological refugees in their own homeland. And if we think about today, colonization and the residual effects of colonization are still not over, because we have to deal with problems like neocolonialism and cultural imperialism. So we revisit post-colonial literature because we are still looking for coping strategies to deal with all these problems.
You are so right. Thank you very much, ma'am. So resilience is often seen as the ability to survive, adapt, and thrive in the face of adversity. In post-colonial literature, this resilience is sometimes expressed through the struggles against the colonial oppression and sometimes by claiming the cultural identity. So, Dr. Rizwan, your forte is Indo-Pak literature and particularly post-colonial poetry. How do you see this resilience depicted in the works of Indo-Pak writers, specifically if we focus on the poets, the famous poets such as Faiz Ahmed Faiz or Intizar Hussain, or for that matter, even the other writers, Saadat Hasan Manto? Can you please reflect upon that?
Yeah, I think that literature in our national language definitely has taken up this question very aggressively. And the idea of, I mean, we often call a poet of resistance, like Mahmoud Darwish, you know, the Palestinian poet is often called a poet of resistance. Same perhaps goes with Faz and other poets. I think poetry has this inherent seed, actually. In poetry, there is this inherent seed of dissent and confrontation, not to speak other yawns also have. So here, let me point out a thing that in your conference title, you have used the word global, actually. Well, I have a little problem with that. Perhaps we are saying that resilience and resurgence is a global, yes. But in a post-colonial state like ours, where there is so much oppression around us, this resilience should be firstly targeted to the indigenous agencies, actually, or the indigenous agency, because we are talking about resistance and resilience and also resurgence. You see, these are very heavy words. Of course, in a conference title, they do carry a lot of metaphoric weight. But I think that it's very important that this resilience should first will be local and indigenous before we jump to the bandwagon of globalism, which we love to do, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But since you asked about the poets, actually, and I think that it reminds me of a very interesting quote by William Wordsworth. He says, "He's a man speaking to man." You know, so that sort of a democracy of spirit that is inherent in poetry is perhaps the best way that the poets can look into. And you know, poets like Habib Jalib, you know, and how they have braved, you know, and how they have braved atrocities. And it's just not, there are many other examples too. You can also take Nazım Hikmet from Turkey. And of course, when you talk about global. So my final answer, I will cap it with this romantic quotation by Shelley. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, the lawmakers, the real lawmakers, perhaps.
Indeed
Euphemism.
they are. Indeed they are. Dr. Maruk, from a broader global perspective, how does resilience manifest in the works of the post-colonial writers belonging to the other parts of the world? For instance, we just had Hank Gang's The Vegetarian, a presentation on that. So how do you think, do you see any connectivity between how we see resilience and how writers belonging to the other parts of the world see resilience?
Post-colonial literature is, it is inherently political because it has an agenda. And the agenda is to denounce colonial rule and colonial discourse and all types of oppression, because colonialism is inherently racist, sexist, and classist. And all types of oppressions are studied under post-colonial criticism. Now, post-colonial writers all over the world are trying to create a counter discourse to put up resistance to the types of oppressions that I've just mentioned. And Han Kang's The Vegetarian, I believe, more readily lends itself to feminist analysis. So, because the protagonist of the story or novel is a woman who is described by her husband as an unremarkable, quiet, and ordinary woman. Now, she is trying to refuse to eat meat or to wear bra for that matter, or to wear lipstick, because that is her own distinct way of putting up resistance to the patriarchal norms of society, which assigns certain roles to women. She thinks that patriarchy is sexist and oppressive, and there I see a connection between post-colonial criticism and feminist criticism, because both these criticisms look at oppression of some sort. Now, Han Kang is trying to, bring to the fore female experiences, probably because she helps us understand female experience better, particularly a female from the South Korean society. And while I was reading this novel, I felt that the South Korean society is very much like any South Asian society, even our own society, because, it upholds patriarchal norms, and patriarchy assigns certain roles to females, and then it's the stability of a patriarchal society as well as a patriarchal family depends upon the conformity of its women to the norms. So I feel that most of the post-colonial writers in general, and particularly the vegetarian in particular, they are talking about different types of oppressions and putting up resistance against them, because resistance could be silent, it could be giving voice to what the oppressed were feeling. So that is, I think, my take on this.
Thank you very much, ma'am. That's very insightful. Yes, please, sir.
I've also read Vegetarian, novel. Just a quick thing. But I think there is a very dangerous parallel that we can draw, because when we see that women must eat meat, men say, so men are associated with this sort of cannibalistic monsterity. And I think this parallel can be very dangerous, specifically in the post-colonial context, actually. And as we are talking about the body, so in the second presentation, the masculinity is shown resilience. In the first presentation, masculinity is shown some kind of a monstrous agency, I think. And I think this can be a little problematic, specifically in post-colonial societies where state often decides the role of the gender. And we know that nationalisms are also divided across gender priorities, you see. So I think this parallel can be very dangerous at the same time, because in that particular novel, just imagine if South Korean men are forcing women to eat meat, what about North Korea? Yeah, what about North Korea, by the way, where you can't even have a haircut without the permission of the government? So I think there can be some very dangerous parallels for our society also. I think Sara Suleri did very well in the Meatless Days, actually, by pointing out that how Pakistani meat-eating priorities actually define our nationalist and economic, priorities. So it's a step further, in what she's saying in the vegetarian. But I have this feeling as if men are omnivorous, and they can eat anything, which includes women, So that's
Thank you very much, sir. We're running short on time, although I have a lot of questions, but we're running short of time, so I'm just going to move to our session chair. And so, as a session chair and as an authority on post-colonial literature, if I may call you, you have seen the transformation of post-colonial studies over the years. And you have a lot of insights to share, I'm sure, with us. And you've heard us talk. But before you just wind up the whole thing, I have a question. I've recently read this critic from Canada. He's a writer and a critic, David Jeffress, and he talks about resistance in a very interesting way. He says that resistance is not merely rebellion. It has the potential of not only shifting the social structures, but it can also turn into a mode of power. These are his exact words. So I would like you to reflect upon this idea of resilience or resistance turning into a mode of power. And then you can please wind up the session and have your insights. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and then asking me to chair the session. But I disagree with you when you say that I am an authority on post-colonial literature. I'm not so. But I think whatever we have discussed here in terms of the wonderful papers presented by our young scholars, I must say, and the experts on my left side and right side, the comments, I would try to connect the dots here. Maybe that helps. And then I'm pretty sure it would be quite dispersed, so you can draw on your own theories out of it. Your question about resistance, and what was the second term you used along?
A resistance turning into a mode of power.
Into a
mode of power.
I don't know, amid all this debate and amid the controversies that post-colonial itself carries in terms of moving back or forward, um, I look at the confusion now more that's coming out of colonial and post-colonial debate, with or without a hyphen. Uh, I would take resilience, and already explained actually, like coming back to the shape or bouncing back, connected to resurgence as well. And I think I would look at it from more spatio-temporal perspective. Much of it depends upon the speed maybe that we carry towards bouncing back. Uh, this may be violent or non-violent, both. So the more we do it with extremism, it may grow into violent resistance. Are we ready for that? That could be a question, and I have no answers for that. But yes, if we have to look for resilience, I would draw a hierarchy of history within, and maybe we need to look at it from the bottom up history and try to see how resilience is being exhibited around us. So, in many ways, resilience to me becomes like whatever binary we carry in terms of colonial, post colonial, after effects, or anti, but an exploration of the self. And I think that is where we are. And in terms of, thank you for using indigeneity that we carry, and the identity that we are looking for. So if our indigeneity allows us to track our identities, be it male, female, man, woman, and whoever else, it's about the split self that we are living with. So if it is about exploration of the self, we all carry stories. And it's our story that makes the history. What's the worth of that story is something, I think we keep ignoring those stories around us. We have to sip the stories like we are sipping tea around. The stories may be with many that we ignore. Like in my own life, I keep watching people who are sitting at the pedestal on the pathways, the cobblers, the hawkers, who might be working very honestly all their life. Are they also post-colonial species, if humans, of course? How do we take care and carry their stories? So I would see all these three works coming to us, whether they are coming to us through nostalgia or through observations or through practices, that they are our stories coming from Southeast Asia or South Asia or Pakistan. They are stories of injuries that we carry along with our identities. Now, of course, the first resilience is about the healing of these injuries. And how would that happen is perhaps stories are to be told and retold and to be listened to as well. How much we can do that, listen to our own stories and let our stories be heard, is something an ongoing process. I would relate it very much to academia, because whatever else we do, as part of academia, we observe, critique, discuss, debate, and teach. And if teaching is so important, I think that is where the story begins for us. So we carry it on and we try to transfer it. Whether they are stories of transgressions or transcendences or many other kinds of trances that we are engaged with but not acknowledge. So I would say, yes, we might have plastic cups with us now, but we also know about the broken teacups. I would relate to what you were trying to differ with partition. I don't exactly remember the name of the critic on the spot, but yes, partition is a perspective. If independence is a perspective, partition also is a perspective. And how much do we bear with it? We need to go back and maybe once again listen to the stories that are unheard. Atrocity is one thing that happens in history, not much talked about, not highlighted, not liked to be highlighted. Coming back to our own indigeneity, I think we see atrocities around. We see them happening every day at various levels in different metrics, be it gender, be it class, be it other categories. But I think we got stories and stories. Because I am director of this International Center for Pakistani Writing in English, I can see every day, everybody tells me they got a story. How would that story make a difference is perhaps for us to realize and work on. So I think this whole process of living in a post-colonial time where we are supposed to be more self-reflective now, also in terms of, as you tried to point out, that there is no end to colonialism. We see our models also coming from the foreign lands still, but I think we develop our own models as well, which are full of atrocities. How do we cope with them? How do we handle our own problems, our own atrocities, our own injuries? How do we heal up from them is, I think, story sharing thing. And thank you for inviting me here that I could listen to so many stories and everybody coming up with something that they might have in their heart yet to be heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wasim, for your thoughts on resilience, resistance. I'm sure our audience are taking a lot of dimensions, a lot of new dimensions of resilience with them after this panel. So I request all of you to please put your hands together for our lovely panel, panel number one. Thank you very much.
Now we would like to request our respectable Dr. Amara Khan to come onto the stage to give away shields and certificates. Our presenter, Ms. Hira Tariq from FCCU, is requested to receive her certificate. Our second presenter, Ms. Mariam Raza from PU, is requested to receive her certificate. Our presenter, Ms. Durre Najjar from LCWU, is requested to receive her certificate. Our moderator, Ms. Aisha Amtul Rashid, is requested to receive her token of appreciation. Our panelist, Dr. Rizwan Akhtar from PU, a prominent scholar, is requested to receive his shield and certificate. Dr. Maruf Bukhari, our distinguished panelist, is requested to receive her souvenir. Session Chair, Dr. Wasim Anwar from KC, an esteemed researcher, is requested to receive his shield and certificate. Thank you, Dr. Khan, Ms. Aisha, Dr. Wasim Anwar, Dr. Maruf Bukhari, and Dr. Rizwan Akhtar for such an enlightening talk and session. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and honored participants, it is our great pleasure to welcome Mr. Shahid Nadeem as National Speaker. Mr. Nadeem is Pakistan's leading playwright and director. Currently, he is Executive Director of Ajoka Theatre and has been associated with Pakistan Television as a producer, general manager, director programs, and deputy managing director. His selection of English translations got published in Oxford University Press in 2008. Several collections of his plays have been published in Pakistan and India. His play Dara was produced by National Theatre London in 2015. His telefilm An Act of Terror was nominated for Scottish BAFTA in 2009. He wrote critically acclaimed film Manto and many popular TV serials including Janjalpura, Neele Haath, Zard Dopeher, Udan, and Airport. His exceptional oratory skills and thought-provoking insights are sure to inspire and captivate us all. A big round of applause for Mr. Nadeem.
So, are you all awake and alert and not too much engrossed in the academic discussions, though very stimulating, but sometimes they have their impact if you don't have some action on stage. So I can't bring action on stage, but I can talk about the action which I have been involved with. So my brief talk, I can title it as Theatre Maker's Guide to Resilience. And by resilience, I mean just not bouncing back or maintaining a status quo, but resilience includes resistance, it includes progress, it includes creativity and moving on, because individual or communities, they don't stay static, they keep moving, and there are challenges, either you are regressing or you are progressing, but resilience means that you are ready to face the odds at an individual level or at an intellectual or at a community level. I can just briefly talk about my own road to resilience come resistance. So I wanted to be a writer, but a writer, at least in my days, was someone who would be asked, okay, you write, but what do you do? So what is your profession? How you will survive? What is your career? So I carried on experimenting, first as a student leader, then I would go and participate in demonstrations on the Mall Road, and then move on to Park Tea House and get involved with my writing community and discuss literature. Then I joined Pakistan Television. There I was supposed to be a producer, later on as a manager. So literally I would be thinking of the stories which I wanted to write, and sometimes writing them while I was producing or signing files or other bureaucratic activities. Then I got imprisoned for my resistance, not my resilience. And in prison, I had rigorous imprisonment, so I was supposed to polish furniture and knit chairs. And at the same time, when we were all locked up in the barrack, I started writing plays for prisoners. And they started acting in my plays, and the most favorite roles they had were of women, of course. So, so that became a very popular activity in Mianwali jail, that even the warders would come and watch the weekend performance by Barrack A, written by me and acted by the 40-odd members of that community, which included death convicts, life-term prisoners, murderers, and some accused of being spies and thieves, all kind of characters. But when they came on stage, they were the characters which they wanted to be. They sang and they laughed and they made fun of the prison authorities and had a great time. So that went on. Then I was sent into exile, and I was working for Amnesty International, the human rights organization, a very, very UN-type organization, very bureaucratic, and where every word has to be measured before you utter it. But I couldn't resist carrying on my writing. So I started writing Christmas pantomimes. So every Christmas they had pantomimes, and these pantomimes, through those scripts, I made fun of officers, colleagues, or our own conflicts and double standards, and everyone had a great laugh. So what I'm trying to say is that even if the life is difficult, you are in exile, you are in prison, you are working in a foreign land, you are working as a manager or whatever, if you are committed to something which you are passionate about, there are always ways of carrying on with the passion which you have. So I was then lucky. I was very fortunate to have a major source of inspiration in my wife, Madhya Gohar, who left us about 7 years ago. So she was quite a slave driver, or put it another way, a source of inspiration who pushed me to carry on. She was not concerned about the economic impact of my activities, because obviously theater is not something which brings you great financial reward. But she was herself committed. She left her job as an English lecturer and established Ajoka, and then established me as a writer and as a son, as a father of our sons. Now coming to theatre making, individual resilience is one thing, but for theatre making, I would like to remember many of you, well, not many of you may be familiar with the game, indigenous game of Kabaddi. But of course, you must have played hide and seek, aankh macholi. So theatre, the kind of resilient theatre which we have established, Ajoka and the likes, it is like Kabaddi. So what is the crucial thing in Kabaddi? You touch them, the adversary, and then run away, get away, not caught. So sometimes they use oil or earth and whatever so that they cannot be caught. So for us, the 40 years of Ajoka has been a game of Kabaddi. We have touched them, we have pushed them. Them means the dictators, the religious extremists, or the patriarchal ideologues, or the enemies of peace. All these characters who have tried to block our progress and who have tried to impose a certain ideology or certain way of life or certain value system, we have touched them, pushed them, made fun of them, mocked them through our theatre, and till today we have not been caught. So that is the crucial thing. Now, how not to get caught? I think theatre is the best place where you can get away with murder, because you don't have to put everything in the words, in the script. There are other ways. There are gestures, and one gesture can make a lot of difference, and the censor authorities would not know how this line will be delivered, what gesture this character will be standing in, or what could be the tension, what would be the musical background, what will be the lights like, any sound effects. So that is one thing. Second, music is a beautiful vehicle for resilience, because sometimes things which are tabooed or which are censored, which are not allowed, if you place them in music, maybe Sufi music, folk music, popular music, parodies, you can get away with a lot of things. So we had a play called Burqa Vaganza, in which all actors were wearing burqas. By all actors mean all actors, male, female, the minister for burqa affairs, the lover, the street vendor, the terrorist, the police officer, they were all wearing burqas. So now dialogues were very simple. A boy wants to meet the girl and the parents don't like it, or society is being very nosy. But it did not say that they will all be wearing burqas, because it doesn't have to give the detail of your costumes in a script which you submit for this censorship. So when the play was presented, the visual impact of everyone wearing a burqa, that if burqa is such a important part of your life, then why not we all wear burqas, and how will we feel? And these burqas included the Ku Klux Klan burqa, the astronaut burqa, the US Marine burqa. So it was not focused on the religious aspect. So it had a great impact, and then it was banned by the minister, not Minister for Burqa Affairs, but Minister for Religious Affairs. And so what now? We changed the name and we called it Hasina Ki Kahani, Khubru Ki Zabani. These were the two names of the characters. And we said, this is a play, no reference to burqa, no reference to the costumes, only Hasina Ki Kahani, Khubru Ki Zabani. So again, we got away for quite a few times until we thought, I think we shouldn't play with fire too much. Then I wrote a play called Dekh Tamasha Chalta Ban about religious extremism in a very sensitive period. And when the blasphemy laws were passed and there were violence all around. And this play has been performed since 1992, 33 years. It refers to the victims of some extremist and intolerant laws, but it does not provoke, it does not make fun of anyone's ideology. It just goes to your heart. It touches your heart through music and through gestures and through different theatrical techniques. So then there was a play which then later converted into a television serial, Janjalpura, about family planning. Now, when I suggested the play, it was initially a theater play called Jam Jam Jive Jammanpura. So produced for the Family Planning Association, later on television. So they said our society is not ready for a debate or a discussion or focus on family planning on primetime television. So I said, well, you tell me what is the objection. We showed them the pilot episode. They said this character, Maulana something, Maulana Umar Daraz, I think, who ran a society called Anjuman-e Afzaish-e Aulad. So, and he was confronted by lady health visitor, role played by Savera Nadeem and later by Samia Mumtaz. So they said, well, this on television, this will not go. This is too much. I said, fine. We will call him Master Umar Daraz. Is that okay? They said, yeah, Master is okay. So it was the same character saying the same things. The get-up was the same. But if you see Janjalpura, you will see Khalid Bhatt playing Master Umar Daraz. So this is how you master the technique of getting away with murder. Okay, then there have been talk about traumas of 1947, 1971. I would include 1977 and 79 as well. And then, of course, what happened in September 2001. Now, we have several plays on the issue of partition. And when we started off, like I'm talking about late 80s or early 90s, it was impossible to present Montoesque interpretation of partition, which means that you don't blame a particular community, and you also promote the cause of peace. So this play, one of the plays, Bulla, on the Sufi poet Bulle Shah, and then a play called Ek Thi Nani, in which Zohra Sehgal and Uzra Mumtaz, two great thespians, they played their own real life roles. And we then took that play to all over India and Pakistan and England and promoted the cause of peace and also enacted the traumas of separation and traumas of partition-related violence. So these plays are enjoyable. People have a great time. Ek Thi Nani is very enjoyable, almost a comedy. Recently we did a play Anni Maida Sufna, about characters, people who stayed back and did not migrate along with their compatriots to India or Pakistan. And we have performed that play in Pakistan and India, in Chandigarh, Amritsar, and Delhi. And it is just incredible how people came. Sometimes people from the partition time in their 80s or 90s, and or their sons and daughters or their grandsons and daughters, and how they cried and how they embraced. And the demons were almost coming out, and a different kind of relationship was being built. And Bulla was such a play that when we took from one city to the other in India, a group of people, 25, 30 people, would travel with us to see the play again. So it had such a huge impact. Theater can not only help you enact and act out and exorcise the demons, but it can build relationships which then can last for a long time. Now, basically, I would say that the best way of playing theater kabaddi is to have humor, make people laugh, have dance, make people enjoy the beauty of dance, have music and make people relish beautiful music. And the lyrics, of course, are your own. The characters are your own. As a writer or as a theater maker, you have this amazing power, godly power of creating characters. You are shaping them. Characters which exist outside, which you can't maybe do much about it. God has created them, or the society has developed them. But in theater, you can create those characters, you can create situations, you can have conflict, because it is important to have conflict in drama, and then you can let your audience be a part of it. So that is the power of theater, which we have been trying to use, so that we individually as well as a group, we can challenge the oppressors, we can make fun of them, we can expose them, and still don't get caught. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's welcome Fatma Hassan, Assistant Professor in the Department of English. She is our moderator for panel 2. Dr. Hassan is an Assistant Professor in the Department of English at Lahore College for Women, University, Lahore, Pakistan. Her research work focuses on post-colonial literature, diaspora studies, and South Asian literature. Her work delves into the complexities of cultural identity, migration, and colonialism's legacies, offering insightful contribution to these fields. We warmly welcome her. The title of the panel is The Intersection of Resilience, Gender, and Sexuality in Literature. This panel would highlight the mechanisms of resistance embedded in the struggle of gender and sexuality.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and good afternoon. We are a bit pressed for time, so without much further ado, I would like to call our panelists. But before that, just a brief introduction of what the panel highlights. The intersection of resilience, gender, and sexuality in literature is the second panel for today. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout the history, gender theories have not only examined identity, but they have also celebrated resilience as a vital force in the lives of those navigating the margins of societies. Today's panel invites us to explore how stories become a powerful means of expression, survival, resistance, and self-discovery. This panel delves into how authors navigate these complex identities through narrative, how resilience is portrayed across different cultural and historical contexts, and why these stories matter now even more so. So, for our panelists, we have Dr. Shahzeb Khan, who is an associate professor at the Institute of English Studies at the University of the Punjab. Apart from teaching courses on literature, criticism, and research, he has made contributions to the discourse on the decolonization of literary studies and education in the country. Dr. Khan's research has been published widely in various journals across the country as well as on international level. His areas of special interest include decoloniality, the indigenization of knowledge, English literature as an instrument of ideology, the institutionalization of literary study, and the intersection of technology and literary studies. Please welcome Dr. Shahzeb Khan onto the stage. Our next panelist for today is the Honorable Mr. Shahid Nadeem. He has just spoken to you as our national speaker. So, sir, can you please come to the stage and grace us? Thank you. Our session chair for today is the distinguished Professor Dr. Amra Raza, who is currently working as the Dean, School of Education at Beacon House National University. Previously, Dr. Raza was the Director of Institute of English Studies and the Dean of Arts and Humanities at the University of the Punjab. She's a researcher, a creative writer, and an English language teacher trainer. She holds the National Jane Townsend Poetry Prize, is the editor of Spaces and Places, an anthology of young creative writers from Pakistan, and co-editor of Voices and Visions, Young Writers from Pakistan, published by the the Oxford University Press. Dr. Raza's research articles and poems have been published in Pakistan and abroad. Please, a very warm welcome to Dr. Raza. Now, my colleague, Ms. Faria, is going to call out the presenters one by one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Our presenter for today, first presenter is Ms. Rifat Rashid from Gulbarg College. The topic of her presentation is Rewriting Womanhood, New Narratives of Resilience and Empowerment in Contemporary Fiction of Maniza Naqvi.
Assalamu alaikum. There is a little confusion. My presentation has not been added here, so I request our moderator to change the presenter. Thank you.
We would request Ms. Mariam Tariq from University of Education to give her presentation. The title of her presentation is Indigenous Feminism in Post-Colonial South Asia and Africa, Resilience, Resistance, and Reclamation of Identity through Mangu Beti's Mission of Kala and Mumtaz Shah Nawaz, The Heart Divided.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. The topic of my research article is Indigenous Feminism in Post-Colonial South Asia and Africa, Resilience, Resistance, and Reclamation of Identity through Mongo BT's Mission to Kala and Mumtaz Shahnawaz, The Heart Divided. Before moving forward, I would like to explain the research context of my article. My paper investigates the relationship between colonialism and female identity formation. This paper actually presents the development of female identity in Pakistan and Africa Cameroon. This research has attempted to present a case for colonial after effects on the identity of the inhabitants of the two former colonies of Africa and South Asia. And this paper actually presents the idea that the genuine liberation cannot be achieved without the unity of sexes. Furthermore, a country's degree of freedom is based on how free its women are to exercise their rights to choose. In a similar vein, a society's degree of civilization can be inferred from how its members treat their women. This paper aims or derives from an interest in post-colonial studies, and the discussion has drawn a parallel between feminism and post-colonialism, as both fight the oppression of the dominant power and have contributed to the feminization of the political discourse, particularly in the former colonies of Europe. Literary work depicts society and society aspects, such as gender norms and the relationship between men and women. This portrayal often explores evolving dynamics influenced by patriarchal structure, particularly evident in post-colonial societies. Authors like Mumtaz Shahnawaz and Mongo Beatty actively challenge patriarchy and women oppression. This research examines women's historical central roles in African communities, contrasting with colonial era patriarchal imposition that marginalized them. This paper is an attempt to highlight the women's liberation struggle in developing countries such as Pakistan and Cameroon. Moving towards the research questions and objective. The first research question is, in what ways do the colonial histories and post-colonial power dynamics influence the construction of gender identities and the enforcement of patriarchal norms in South Asian and African context? The second research question is, what are the key socio-political, cultural, and economic factors that shape the experience and challenges faced by women in post-colonial South Asia and African society? And how do these factors intersect with colonial legacy? Moving towards the research objectives, the first research objective is to examine how Mongo Beatty's Mission to Kala and Mumtaz Shahnawaz, The Heart Divided, articulate indigenous feminist perspective, focusing on the themes of resilience and resistance against colonial and patriarchal structures in post-colonial South Asia and Africa. To investigate the narrative strategies employed by Beatty and Shahnawaz to illustrate the reclamation of identity among indigenous women, emphasizing how their works challenge dominant narratives and redefine the notions of womanhood. Moving towards the theoretical framework, the theoretical frame is post-colonial feminism. This framework will guide the analysis of how colonial histories have shaped gender dynamics in South Asia and Africa. Post-colonial feminism critiques both colonial and patriarchal structure, emphasizing the unique experience of women from formerly colonized nations. It seeks to highlight the voices of indigenous women, examining how their identities are formed in resistance to both colonial oppression and local patriarchies. Moving towards the discussion and analysis of the article, the colonial use of stereotypical binaries opposition contributed to the maintenance of the difference between the superior colonizer and the inferior colonized, and it was also extended to undermine women. The patriarchal mentality that forces women to relegate themselves to marginal role is one of the barriers to women identity. Moreover, the indigenous beliefs, language, and culture were an attempt to be eradicated by colonial policies and practices. The role of indigenous women in society was dramatically and often negatively impacted by those endeavors. The problem of the bride price is a major issue in African literature. In Beatty's novel Mission to Kala, 1957, Niam's wife, the female protagonist of the story, is in a subordinate position. One could contend that after their parents sold them, they were given over to their husbands and came under their complete authority. Mongo Beatty portrays how women are used by men and how they are subservient to them in relation, marriage, and household duties. The protagonist of Mission to Kala, a female character, finds herself entangled in a web of dominance and submission. Niams exhibits his ideas when he says, "I am the ground and she is just a dead leaf that has just come off the tree following his wife's departure." In most of the cases, women begin work earlier than men. For example, a woman typically begins work earlier in the morning than her spouse. She gets up before her spouse has to make breakfast. then has to accompany him to the field. Even when the field work is over, she has to gather firewood while her husband returns home to relax. Another issue is the issue of treatment, like how men treat women. There is a relationship of master and slave between men and women. Since some African tradition place an emphasis on male superiority, the wife is placed under the complete authority of their husbands. In such arrangement, a woman is trained to obey and respect all the members of her husband's family. So the husband-wife relationship is like a master-servant relationship. Moving forward, women are also suppressed through religious institutions in Africa, as in some African society, the bride price is a religious practice in which the bride's parents receive money and goods from the bridegroom in exchange for his right to marry their daughters. Another prominent issue that was discussed by Mongo Beatty in his work is the idea of prostitution. Most of the feminists see prostitution as a form of slavery, and they say that far from decreasing rape rates, prostitution led to a sharp increase in violence against women. Another major issue that was discussed by Mongo Beatty in his work is the issue of sterility. The issue of sterility is also very prominent in African society because those women who cannot rear child, they are considered as fallen objects or fallen individuals. They are sometimes considered as witches as well. Due to this poor treatment of the women who are considered as barren in traditional African society, Niam's wives seek release from the miseries of her home. The other work is The Heart Divided by Mumtaz Shahnawaz. This work is set in colonial India of 1930s and 1940s, and it portrays the story of two sisters, Sugra and Zahra. Sugra posed for nothing less than independence for erasing inequality. The development of the political consciousness in the characters of Mumtaz Shahnawaz, such as the character of Sugra, who is elder, and Zohra, take divergent paths. The novel begins by presenting Sugra as happily guiding maids and Zohra as relentlessly skimming newspaper. In The Heart Divided, Mumtaz Shahnawaz created the image of educated and politically active women who tried to stand side by side with their men and took part in many political activities. This could be the first step to the socio-political awareness of the women, which may lead them to their emancipation and empowerment. But this is only limited to the upper level of the society or the elites. In this novel, the women are defying the tradition of parda because they think that it hinders the progress of women and that she could maintain her purity even without this. Moving towards the finding of this work, this paper highlights the difference between the condition of women in South Asia and Africa. In the South Asian settings, women are redefining feminism and national politics from a woman-centered perspective. On the other hand, in the African setting, women lost their status in the native customs of continent and were subjugated by the Victorian patriarchal system, which viewed women as less than humans. This study also concludes that the genuine liberation cannot be achieved without the unity of sexes, and a country's degree of freedom is based on how free its women are and how much power they have to make their own decision. In a similar vein, a society's degree of civilization can be inferred from how its members treat women. This paper also concludes that the relationship of men and women are an issue that never ends but continuously grows up. The relation of both the colonizer and the colonized become a phenomena because of the patriarchal system dominates in a post-colonial society. And findings of this paper also reveals the similarities are not equally balanced between the literatures of South Asia and Africa. The unique circumstances of the two cultures which suffered and preserved during colonial times can be blamed for the cause. There is a strong sense of resistance to colonial power in both South Asian and African literature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam Tarek. We will once again invite Ms. Rifat Rashid from Gulbarg College. The title of her presentation is Rewriting Womanhood, New Narratives of Resilience and Empowerment
in contemporary fiction of Maniza Naqvi.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rifat Rashid, Assistant Professor of English from Government Graduate College for Women, Gulbarg, Lahore. I feel obliged and honored to be part of this international conference on literature that is actually the celebration of knowledge, resilience, and empowerment. The topic of my presentation is Rewriting Womanhood, New Narratives of Resilience and Empowerment in Contemporary Fiction of Maniza Naqvi. First of all, let me explain the research context of my study. This paper examines the narratives of resilience and empowerment in contemporary fiction of Maniza Naqvi, specifically focusing on her novel On Air. In On Air, the radio show serves as both a literal and metaphorical platform for women's voices. The media, as a traditionally male-dominated space, has historically been a powerful tool for reinforcing patriarchal values. However, the act of a woman hosting a radio show and engaging with listeners provides an alternative narrative that subverts traditional media representations. The media has long been a complicit in the objectification and marginalization of women. In On Air, however, Naqvi uses the radio show to create a space where women are not merely objectives, they are not the objects to be viewed, but active participants in shaping their own narratives. Na's role as a host not only offers her a platform to share her own story, but also facilitates a collective feminist discourse in which women's voices become central to the story. In order to validate the following this discussion, following research questions and objectives are relevant. This paper examines how does Maniza Naqvi's novel On Air challenge patriarchal structures and represent women's resilience and empowerment through the use of multiple narrative voices, and what role does gender discourse and socio-cultural context play in shaping these narratives. It will also examine how the novel's characters, particularly the protagonist Naz Ahmed, assert their agency and challenge subjugation within the socio-political and familial constraints of their environment. Dear audience, this paper maintains that the socio-cultural context of the novel further underscores its significance. Despite the progressiveness attributed to certain segments of Pakistani society, gender inequality remains pervasive in both private and public spheres. Na's journey as a radio host symbolizes the broader struggle for representation and agency in a society where women's voices are often silenced or discriminated. Here I want to share with you a very interesting article that was published in Independent Urdu, dated 8th April 2025. The dates are very pertinent. The title of the article is कश्मीर में जारी ऑनलाइन नफरत के खिलाफ बरसरे पेकार खातून रेडियो मेज़बान. In this article, we see that the same journey RJ Mehek Zubair, you can see the picture, in Kashmir, who is facing backlash for the last 7 years for the same reasons Maniza Naqvi had depicted through her protagonist Naz in the year 2000. That was the publication date of the novel. So 2000 and 2025. The gap is 25 years perhaps. I'll quote a few lines from the column. It says, ख़वातीन रेडियो मेज़बान के ख़िलाफ़ होने वाली मुखालफत मर्द हम मनसबों से कहीं ज़्यादा शिद्दत से की जाती है, जहाँ मर्द आरजेस को ज़्यादातर इनके पेशा वराना अंदाज, मवाद या आरा पर तनकीद का सामना होता है, वहीं ख़वातीन को ज़ाती और सिनफी हमलों का निशाना बनाया जाता है. There is so much similarity between the fictional character of Naqvi's protagonist Naz Ahmed in the year 2000 and the real life Mehek Zubair in 2025. See, the times have changed. Times have changed a lot, but the stereotype notions are still the same. However, both these real and fictional characters assert their authority by sticking to their choices. And in the novel, we hear Naz, when she hears a male caller who says, "It doesn't look right that a woman should be so out late night." And she replies, "I am actually not out, I'm very much inside." So she sticks to her own choice. It's very unfortunate that women in South Asian cultures, especially in remote regions of Pakistan, often face systemic challenges, including restrictive familial roles, limited access to education, and lack of representation in decision-making spaces. The worst, perhaps, is the crime of honor killing. I have pointed towards this grave issue when the protagonist receives a caller who hides her identity but describes her constant fear of being killed by her family because she had used her own choice in marriage, rejecting her illiterate cousin. And the name of the caller was, later it was discovered, Shaista. Naz says, "At last there is a woman as indignant and bewildered as I am. I think I'm frustrated. Fear? I think I'm afraid of what? Of being found out, of being judged, of not being worthy. I want to remain hidden, invisible." Here I also want to make reference to a very recent horrible incident in the context of honor killing, mentioned in the column by Yasir Pirzada, who revoiced a journalist, Sabukh Saeed, in the column. It echoes the same question: why women are denied their right of survival, their basic right to choose. And the title of the column is, "और जब जिंदा दफन की गई लड़की से पूछा जाएगा किस खता की वजह से उसे कत्ल किया." The date is 9th April 2025. It was published in Daily Jang. The background of this column is Rabia Said, who had married using her will, and her uncle murdered her and her 16 months older daughter while she was reciting Quran a few months back. A doctor in Multan, Sania Zara, who was murdered by her husband, lecturer Feroza in Lodhra, not to forget Noor Muqaddam at Kandil Baloch. Unfortunately, there are hundreds and hundreds of stories, these tragic stories that are scattered around us, far from the southern Punjab, Sindh, to metropolitan cities like Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi. Naqvi's portrayal of this horrific issue is still pertinent in today's scenario. Coming back to today's paper, my research work, I'm just skipping because of the shortage of time. My research work engages with the theoretical frameworks of feminist criticism, new narratology, and post-colonial feminism thought to situate Naqvi's work within a broader scholarly tradition that interrogates gendered identities, narrative agency, and resistance in patriarchal cultures. By synthesizing these critical perspectives, the study outlines the key discussions. Moreover, drawing on the works of feminist scholars such as Chanda Talpit, Mohanty, and Gayatri Spivak, the study situates Naqvi's narrative within the larger context of post-colonial feminist thought also. Mohanty argues that women's struggles must be understood within their specific cultural and historical context, challenging the tendency to universalize female experiences. In this light, On Air provides a uniquely Pakistani perspective on women's agency, shedding light on the socio-economic, geopolitical, and linguistic factors that shape their lives. So coming to the findings and conclusion section, I just read the highlights. It unpacks gender and power with intersectional perspectives. It gives voice to women through multi-perspective narratives. We have socio-cultural and political context of female empowerment. There is another key factor finding, rewriting womanhood, redefining femininity through resistance. Finally, the novel offers a powerful narrative of resistance and redefinition of femininity by positioning women as active agents of change. On one occasion, the protagonist Naz, she says, "Time to tear down the veil, emerge from behind it. No need to hide, no need to fear. Covers and shrouds are only for those afraid of exposure or for death. Letting others find definitions and vocabulary for you, we should not let the mobs dictate us." This shows the free-spirited nature of Naz, And she says, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Nas and the callers to the radio show represent a new kind of womanhood, one that is brave, vocal, and unapologetically assertive. The findings, the future implications of this study, these are the highlights. I will like to end my presentation on the sayings of Maniza Naqvi. She says, this research and study wants people to do a little soul searching, to look into themselves for the cause of their misery instead of always pointing fingers at others. The East India Company was certainly responsible for wreaking havoc on the Indian subcontinent, but the seeds of our own destruction were within our own homes, in our relationships between men and women. So the solution is in our own hands. We have to redefine our roles for better humankind based on justice and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rifat Rashid. Next presenter is Dr. Umma Abubakar, Department of English and Literary Studies, Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria. She will connect with us through recording. The title of her presentation is Silence and the Relentless Desire to Speak, a feminist reading of the female dilemma in Maxine Hong Kingston's No Name Woman.
Morning. My name is Umma Abubakar from the Department of English and Literary Studies, Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria. I am honored to present my research at this prestigious international conference. Today I will share my findings on narratives of resilience, gender, and sexuality in literature, a feminist reading of Maxine Hong Kingston's No Name Woman, which is a story that features among a collection of short stories titled The Woman Warrior, written by the Chinese-American writer Maxine Hong Kingston. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of the organizers, ICLNR, for their foresight, particularly regarding the primary theme of the conference. So in this presentation, I will discuss key points regarding women's silence, despite their efforts to voice out their concerns, ideas, and opinions. Firstly, the study investigates the concept of silence as a dilemma that affects women in the context of Chinese-American culture. And deploying feminist theory as an analytical tool, it analyzes the story No Name Woman, extracted from the anthology The Woman Warrior by Kingston. As a way of introduction, the culture of silence and the quest to voice out in Maxine Hong Kingston No Name Woman serves as a nucleus for this work. Kingston, in her No Name Woman, has depicted silence as a dilemma that affects women irrespective of region. The wrenching disappointment of the inability to voice out the plights can be disheartening. And primarily, patriarchy encourages the silences of women in the society in order to retain the supremacy over the women gender. Maxine Hong Kingston was born in Stockholm, California in 1940, and she's an American writer whose works are rooted in her experience as a first-generation Chinese-American. On the primary text, that is to see the woman warrior, or in particular, the No Name Woman, it is briefly as a story in the Woman Warrior, Memoirs of a Girlhood Among Ghosts, and was published in 1976. The story focuses on an unnamed woman who passes through uncanny experience because of the patriarchal nature of her community. She is lynched by members of her community for getting pregnant for someone who was not her husband. And because of the magnanimity of the offense, the nameless woman, who is Kingston Anne, was not given the slightest opportunity to explain or vindicate herself, that is, as far as how she got pregnant in the absence of her husband. And at the same time, Kingston's mother tells her the story of the No Name Aunt in order to caution her against finding herself in a similar situation, which may probably lead to total alienation from her community. Now, we look at the primary problem, or the central problem of the research, is that we are trying to find out the primary reasons why women reverted into silence, because they could revert into silence either voluntarily or even by compulsion. And this study stands to be significant in the sense that it will attempt, or rather it reveals the structures that make women revert into silence despite their efforts to voice out their concerns. Women also revert into silence for some other reasons that this study tries to explicate. So in a nutshell, silence has left our society in a state of mess, and therefore this necessitates a critical perusal into the issue. And by selecting this story, Men and Women, we try to depict the moments of silence among women. We have explained from the beginning that the theoretical framework adopted for the study is feminist theory, which according to Shawalter is led as an empirical open in the theoretical storm. In other words, it tries to show that the woman's lack is not particularly an inherent lack, but rather a lack of a lack, because they lacked philosophy and then they were forced into silence by patriarchy and other such ideologies that try strenuously to suppress women. And now we also attempt to see how Operation Fear and the quest to speak up in Manzikang, Kingston No-Name Woman is manifested. First of all, Kingston No-Name Woman portrays the plight of Chinese women who have no voice because of their gender. Secondly, being a woman in the Chinese society of Manzikang is similar to being an animal because the woman is equated to an animal. And thirdly, this happens to jeopardize the reasons of a woman's existence because she's forced by the society to appear non-existent. And this No-Name Woman story repudiates instances that portray suppression of women, perpetually making them live in fear and refuse to voice out issues they find distressing. Now, what are the consequences of silence, as we have learned from the story No-Name Woman? Firstly, the No-Name Aunt in Kingston faces serious oppression because of the patriarchal nature of the society, or more explicitly, because of her gender. Secondly, a silence in the face of great danger shows helplessness in the midst of oppression.
Dear audience, we are apologetic about the sound condition of the video, but her work, I guess you've seen the major slides highlighting the kind of research and the paper that she has written. So I hope her research is clear. So I think now we can begin with the panel discussion, and the silence that she has mentioned that she's worked in, her paper can be discussed through the panel discussion. Thank you. Now, thank you for, first of all, the two presenters who were here for your insightful research. And I would like to start the discussion with a very basic question to our worthy panelists, and which they can take turns in answering. In what ways do intersectional identities such as race and class complicate or enrich literary representations of resilience, which are tied to gender and sexuality? If we can begin with Mr. Shahid Nadeem, and then probably Dr. Shahzeb can reflect upon it, or we can begin with you, sir. Thank you.
Well, I think when it comes to race and gender, the point is that everything has to be contextualized. And I think that one dilemma that we are in as literary scholars, as textual scholars, is that we engage with texts, especially because we deal with an alien language, which, of course, it did not naturally come to our society. So the point is that we are, as Plato said, we are perhaps twice removed from reality. So we are reading texts, and then texts that are written in English. Now, all of us who are part of English departments, we know that one very important issue that we discuss in our classrooms is misrepresentation of our society, is exoticization of our society when it comes to literature which is available in English or written in English. And of course, there are specific socio-economic reasons for that. Most of the Pakistani writers who have written in English, they've been educated abroad, they've been part of the elite. The problem with our country is that we don't have a single Pakistan. We have many Pakistans. As one analyst said, that Dr. Adil Najam, while talking about environment, he said that, well, there is a third world in the first world and there is a first world in the third world. So the point is that when we engage with literature which is available in English, we have a literature which is either too specific to a particular set of experiences. Those experiences are genuine, but those experiences do not represent the country at large. And then the point is that, but this is not the case with literature which is written originally in either Urdu or our regional languages, because it's much more connected to environment, to our problems, to different segments which exist in our society. So I think that first of all, this context is important. And then it's also part of colonial educational model, that it's textual. For instance, I'm from Bahawalpur. So we have a beautiful desert, Cholistan, we call it Rohi. A lot of literature, great literature has come out from that land, from that nature. We have a play by Ojoka, Kala Meda Bhes, and then there are so many inspirations which come from there. But the schools which are located on the very edge of that desert, those schools do not teach their children about any flora and fauna of the desert, about that poetry, because it's available in Saraiki. So I thought that perhaps the situation is different. A couple of years ago, last year, I went to Baltistan, Skardu, and I was mesmerized by the beauty of River Sindh and of course mountains there. And I asked them, कि आप लोगों के यहाँ पे तो ये problem नहीं होगा, and you must be teaching your children about your own mountains and flora and fauna and about nature. तो वो कह रहे हैं, no, we don't have anything of that sort. Our textbooks come from Islamabad, and this nature is not there in our books. Now you connect that to gender, of course, again, or problems that are, so our knowledge is not experiential. We basically get knowledge from our senses. We experience the society which exists out there. With English departments, what happens is that our experience is conditioned through the text that we study, through the ideology which exists in our departments. So I think that there is a greater need to, for instance, as far as the word race is concerned, I think again, even this has to be indigenized, because we've got, for instance, Zaat Paat and Biradari और चीज़ें, वो race नहीं है यहाँ पे. तो यहाँ पे मैं ख़त्म करते हुए ये बात करूँगा कि जो हमारा इल्म को acquire करने का mechanism है, अब we as professors, our teachers are sitting here, colleagues, I think that we need to reorient English departments in such a way that we are connected to our society, and there is less of this sort of bias towards Pakistan, its languages, regional languages. How we do it, I think that should be on our agenda for the next 5-10 years. So in that context, I would, okay.
No, thank you, Dr. Shahzeb. I just wanted to add on to what you said, that when we need to, somehow align our departments to our own indigenous culture. But I guess our education system is also perhaps the legacy of colonialism. And when it comes to decolonization, this is one of the things that perhaps we've not been able to do, and we should be looking at. So,
I would love to make one more point.
Please.
देखिए, 2 papers were presented. मरियम तारिक ने present किया, indigenous feminism की बात की. उससे पहले जो paper, उसके बाद जो present किया गया, उसमें भी justice की बात है, चंद्रा मोहांती की बात है. अब सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि दोनों जगह पे ये बात है कि हम मगरिब के लेंस से अपने आप को देख रहे हैं. दूसरी जगह बात इंडिजिनस उसमें एक जुमला वो बार बार उन्होंने बोला कि जेन्युइन लिबरेशन नहीं हो सकती जब तक दोनों सेक्सेस साथ ना चलें. फिर उन्होंने एक बात की जो बाचा खान की बात रेजोनेट की, इस धरती के एक बहुत अजीम एक स्टेट्समैन, आई वुड से एन एक्टिविस्ट, अ पॉलिटिशियन, एन इंटेलेक्चुअल. बाचा खान क्या कह रहे हैं, उनकी बात की तरफ इशारा था विदाउट कोटिंग हिज नेम, कि उन्होंने कहा कि किसी तमद्दुन को अगर आपने देखना है, किसी तहजीब को कि वो किस दर्जे पे है, तो आप ये देखें कि वो अपनी ख़वातीन के साथ क्या मामला करते हैं. अब बात ये कि ये बात अब यहाँ पे सुने हमें, मैं जब भी शायद नदीम साहब, जाहिर बात है ही इज़ एन आइकॉनिक फिगर, और इन टर्म्स ऑफ पाकिस्तान कल्चर स्पेशली लिटरेचर थिएटर, तो इनकी एक फिनोमिनल प्रेजेंस है। जहाँ भी मैंने देखा, अभी पिछले दिनों पता नहीं कौन सी जगह थी जहाँ पे इन्होंने डांटा कनेड था, जहाँ ऑर्गेनाइजर्स को आपने कहा कि यहाँ अपनी वाइफ का, मदीहा गौहर का जिक्र करते हुए इन्होंने कहा कि शी वाज नॉट एम्पली रिप्रेजेंटेड इन व्हाट वाज गोइंग ऑन टुडे। वो थिएटर एट कनेड जो वाला प्रोग्राम था। इसी तरह आज इन्होंने जिक्र किया, तो हर अपनी गुफ्तगू से पहले ये अपनी वाइफ का, मदीहा गौहर साहिबा का, जिनका बहुत एक स्ट्रॉन्ग इन्फ्लुएंस है, उनका उसकी एक्नॉलेजमेंट करते हैं, एंड दैट इज़ द ब्यूटी ऑफ इट ऑल। बट आई वुड से इन टर्म्स ऑफ फेमिनिस्ट थियोराइजेशन, ये वाला पहलू जो फेमिनिस्ट थियोराइजेशन वेस्ट से आ रही है, हमारी सोसाइटी ज़्यादा एक कम्युनिटेरियन है, उसके अपने अंदर मैकेनिज़म्स भी एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, लेकिन वो somehow because we are not creating our own theory, that's why we are not giving it due acknowledgement कि हम लोग किस तरह से theorize इसको differently कर सकते हैं।
I guess, yes, this is something that we need to work on, perhaps research more. Sir, if you would please comment on, or I would like you to add how theater can play a role in this. With audience interaction or stage depiction of characterization, how can it show resilience when it comes to gender, depicting gender and sexuality within, as Shahzeb Saab mentioned, within the context of Pakistan?
Thank you. Firstly, I would just want to speak a little bit about feminism and men. So I think feminism, as it is defined today, is much wider in scope, in social, political, gender perspective, and which is really admirable. But when I started to write, like in late 80s, one of my first play was Bari, which actually focused on the anti-women laws introduced by General Ziaul Haq. And it had stories, 3 stories of women from different class backgrounds, different social context. And the basic force, the basic focus was that is a middle class or an upper middle class women rights activist aware of the conditions of women in our villages or in our lower classes. And the play is about her process of becoming more familiar and more aware of the condition, the class and the race and other issues which affect women. So I think in our society or in all society, men have to play a very active role in the struggle to build a gender just society. And they should not be in any way excluded or made a target, although there are reasons why they should be targeted, but they should be involved, because unless you involve them and associate them in the struggle, then you won't be able to get the desired results. So coming to the role of theater, or as a writer or as a television producer, I think gender awareness of a writer is very important, may it be a woman or a man writer. And you can see in our television plays how some of our very successful women writers are playing havoc with the concept, and how a woman is presented or projected as a victim or as part of a conspiracy and real evil woman, and the relationships are so poisonous that you get a very distorted picture of our society. So, and the basis of any television or theater production is the script. And the writer's awareness is very important, how you project the role of a woman in the play, or a man. And I would also refer to my own experience, because we ourselves, we are proud to call Ajoka a feminist theatre group, and myself as a feminist writer, because we very deliberately, we ensure that we present strong women characters, even if they are victims, then how they respond. So I will give you example, like in a teleplay Jawaz, which was shown on Geo, and earlier on as a theatre play called Kari. We show women being investigated and interrogated by a panchayat for some case where some immoral action has taken place. And the way they are interrogated, and the way the women respond, that is in your hand, if you are aware that how sensitive you can be. So in the end of that play, the women who have been who are being interrogated, they join hands and ensure that the couple who is accused of having contact with each other is allowed to, or they play a role in letting them escape from the panchayat's custody. So this is how you can manage. And then very recently, I would say, Saira and Myra is a new play based on Asma Jilani, Asma Jahangir's cases, where we touched on a very sensitive subject based on a real story of a woman who wanted to divorce her husband from, she was from Peshawar and she came here, and her mother came to Lahore, came to Hina Jilani's office to meet, apparently to meet and bless her daughter, who had left house and was staying in a shelter home. And she came, and along with her came the killer. And with her connivance, her daughter was killed. So this place, Saira and Myra questions whether motherhood, the archetypal image of mother as the selfless love incarnate, how they can be influenced and forced by tradition and by the so-called values. So you have to provoke your audience, and you have to question them. So gender awareness is not just presenting a woman as a victim or presenting a woman as a warrior. There are so many layers in between, so that we are more aware of the gender and the justice in our society. So I think I fully agree that men and women have to join, women have to take a lead, but men should join that caravan of a just, gender-just society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shahid Nadeem, sir. Okay, so I would now invite our session chair, Dr. Amra Raza, to conclude and highlight few key insights and challenges that today's conversation has highlighted, and how can we navigate them in the future when it comes to literature in general. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, heartiest congratulations to the Vice Chancellor of LCWU, Dr. Bushra, the Dean, Dr. Fariha, as well as Amara. Dr. Amara, is she here? Thank you. Thank you for bringing us all together. I've met so many people here. It must have taken a lot of organization. So congratulations on organizing this event. Before I sort of go into an academic sort of gist of the papers that were presented, I just want to commend Dr. Shazeb and Dr. Shahid Nadeem. I am privileged कि in a feminist panel मुझे 2 आदमी मिले हैं. So thank you. Dr. Shazeb has always had, he's a decolonization activist. So I expected this discussion from him. Very rightly said, ये हमारा अपना कसूर है also, that our literature panders to the West, especially if we want our work published. वो कहते हैं कि आप अपने narratives में दिखाएं कि women oppressed हैं. ज़रूर हैं, लेकिन West में भी हैं. So Dr. Shahid Nadeem's women, I've seen a lot of his plays. They're very strong. But somehow or the other, the audience can identify with their pain and trauma, not only as women, but as a human being. That is the prime objective, or should be the prime objective of any narrative, whether it's fiction or drama, कि beyond gender भी आप उनका pain experience कर सकें. So that is important to me. But we do not have, ये हमारा कसूर है, we do not have enough story writers, we don't have enough textbook writers. Quite some time ago, Ferosans के लिए थोड़ा सा मैंने काम किया था, जिसमें syllabus में English के लिए short stories और reading comprehension questions उनके ऊपर बने हुए थे. तो एक story थी जिसके अंदर एक आदमी को एक हांडी मिलती है, बहुत बड़ी हांडी होती है, उसके अंदर जो भी चीज़ डालता जाता है तो वो डबल हो जाती है. तो वो घर लेके आता है and his wife puts in money. So she's characterized as this greedy woman who wants money. And this young child reading the story would feel that that's how women are. And guess what the man puts in? He puts in his wife. के 2 हो जाती हैं. So where is this coming from? So this is us writing stories for our children को हम कहते हैं West stereotype कर रहे हैं, हम खुद भी तो stereotype कर रहे हैं. So about the papers. Thank you. और हमने ये mention किया था जी. अच्छा, all 3 papers presented in this session, they used a feminist lens. So we were expecting to some extent their arguments, and the focus was mostly on post-colonial fiction with female protagonists. All 3 papers, they presented female characters from diverse social and financial backgrounds. The first paper highlighted indigenous women's liberation struggle with a focus on gender dynamics. So it was a large umbrella discussion. The second paper by Rifat Rashid prioritized voice. A space is provided in her in the text which she's examining for the female voice in the media, not just for venting, okay, but also for sharing strategies to overcome subjugation. Now, this is very important. It's not just a space for venting or talking about the pain and trauma. It also evolves strategies to counteract, okay, this sort of oppression. In a way, I thought that the narrative that she was discussing was, Naqvi herself giving the freedom to her protagonist Naz, who in turn gives space to other characters to speak about their struggles. The mode thus shifts in the novel, which was discussed, to the oral. It's through the female voice that the struggles are revisited. Thus, we have a multiplicity of narrative voices which characterize, in turn, the multiplicity of the levels at which women struggle. It's not just 1 or 2 levels, it's a lot more. In the third paper by Uma Abu Bakr, from what I could understand, it presented an interesting study on the silence of women. For us, silence is unnatural. ऐसे ही है ना? So it was an interesting, paper. When Kingston's female characters internalize silence, it distorts their personalities because silence is actually unnatural to women. And it also connected to the previous paper. This silence, because it's unnatural, erodes even the family structure. So in all 3 papers, we have either an obvious opposition between the women and the patriarchy, between men and women. So it's a good thing that in this hall, the women are in majority. We have exactly 10 men at present in this hall. All 3 papers thus show a new generation of women, those who are aware, those who are ready, and those who are articulate. Thank you.
Thank you, our special session chair, for so thoughtfully winding up the discussion on gender and sexuality in relation to resilience and resistance. I would also like to thank our panelists for their diverse opinions about the topic, and I'm sure we're going to meet them very soon. So now I hand over the mic to my colleague, Ms. Fariha. Thank you, the audience as well.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Now we would like to request our distinguished head of the department, Dr. Mara Khan, to come onto the stage to give away shields and certificates. Our presenter, Ms. Mariam Tariq, University of Education, Lahore, is requested to receive her certificate. Our second presenter, Ms. Rifat Rashid from Gulberg College, Lahore, is requested to receive her certificate. Dr. Uma Abu Bakr, Department of English and Literary Study, Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria, is also appreciated for her presentation. Session moderator, Dr. Fatma Hassan, is requested to receive her certificate and shield. Dr. Shahzeb Khan, our knowledgeable panelist, is requested to receive his token. Our celebrated national speaker and worthy panelist, Mr. Shahid Nadeem, is requested to receive his souvenir. Our session chair, Dr. Amra Raza, our leading academic, is requested to receive her souvenir. We would request our big-hearted sponsors, Mr. Kashif Sana and Muhammad Taha from Vital Tea, to receive their token.
Now, I'd like to ask Ms. Fariha Saeed, our session host, to receive a small token of appreciation.
Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to request Dr. Mara Khan for conference vote of thanks.
Madam, you can please take a seat. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon once again, and thank you very much. So as we wrap up our day one, I would just like to take a couple minutes to thank everyone who made this event successful. So yes, first of all, our distinguished panelists, our session chairs, thank you very much, our moderators, our hosts. Thank you very much for both the sessions. I'm sure that all of us will be taking a lot to reflect on and to think on when we move out of this venue. Thank you to the very attentive audience. I'm sure you have enjoyed it. And I appreciate your enthusiasm. Of course, I'm very thankful, sorry. Resilient audience. All righty. So my special thanks to our national speaker, Sir Shahid Saab. Thank you very much for taking time out. And I would also like to thank our worthy Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Uzma Qureshi, for her continuous support. And this conference was not possible without her. And last but not the least, definitely thank you very much, the entire Department of English. Very well done, brilliant. And I think every one of you has performed multiple roles in this conference. So you were the hosts, you were the moderators, and then right after that insightful discussion, you were also managing tea and lunch. So kudos to all of you. And I must tell you that we have 2 more very exciting days upcoming, and I hope to see all of you tomorrow again. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khan. All the guests and faculty members are requested to join us for a group photo.